The world's first deal. How a handful of grain and a length of cloth, exchanged beside a quiet river 5,000 years ago, gave birth to every business, market, and economy that has ever existed. By Sleep to Business Genius, published in Business History and Commerce in Mesopotamia, 3000 BC. Close your eyes for a moment. Drift back 5,000 years. The world is quieter then, no hum of traffic, no flicker of screens, no notifications demanding your attention. Just wind moving through tall river reeds. The low call of a crane settling on still water. The smell of warm earth baking slowly under a Mesopotamian sun. You are standing at the edge of the ancient world. On either side of you, two rivers run long and slow and indifferent toward the distant sea. The Tigris to your east. The Euphrates to your west. Between them stretches a vast and fertile plain that people will one day call the cradle of civilization. But for now, it is simply home. And somewhere in this quiet world, in a dusty open space between mud brick homes, in the cool shade of a clay wall, beside the slow lap of river water, a man holds out a clay pot filled with grain. A woman across from him holds a folded length of woven cloth. They look at each other. They nod. They make the world's very first deal. No contract. No currency. No lawyers. Just two human beings, each with something the other needed, deciding that trust was enough to make the exchange. This was bartering. And around 3000 BC in ancient Mesopotamia, it quietly became the foundation upon which every business, every market, every economy in all of human history would eventually be built. ****. The land between two rivers. 3000 BC, modern-day Iraq, a population 3 million. The word Mesopotamia comes from ancient Greek, mesos, meaning middle, and potamos, meaning river. The land between rivers. And these two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, were not simply geography. They were life itself. They flooded each year with dependable generosity, depositing rich dark silt across the plains that made the soil so fertile, so extraordinarily giving, that people could grow far more food than they needed to survive. And when you grow more than you need, something remarkable happens. You begin to have something to offer. The farmers of Mesopotamia grew barley and wheat in quantities a single family could not consume. The fishermen pulled more fish from the river than one household could eat before the heat spoiled them. The weavers produced cloth that exceeded what their own children could wear. The potters fired vessels by the dozen, far more than their own shelves could hold. Surplus created possibility. And possibility created commerce. In those open, dusty spaces between homes, the world's first marketplaces, people began to gather. Tentatively at first. Then with growing regularity. Then with the quiet confidence of those who know that what they carry is valuable, and that somewhere nearby, someone needs it. Historical fact bartering, the direct exchange of goods without currency, began around 3000 BC in Mesopotamia. The earliest written records ever discovered, clay tablets from the Sumerian city of Uruk dating to 3100 BC, are not poetry or prayer. They are receipts. Even the world's first writing was, at its core, about commerce. *****. The invisible language of exchange. Imagine Adad. A Mesopotamian farmer, lean and weathered, his hands calloused from the hoe. This season has been generous. His granary is full of barley, more than his family will eat before the next harvest. In the language of his world, he is wealthy. But Adad's fishing net has torn. His clay water jug cracked in the last fire. His children's sandals are worn through. And his wife has been asking, with a patience that is beginning to thin, for a length of wool cloth. Adad cannot make these things himself. But he knows who can. Down by the river lives Enlil, a fisherman with nimble fingers who can repair a net. Across the square, old Nana fires pottery that never cracks. At the edge of the settlement, a widow named Tiamat weaves cloth so tight and even it is spoken of with admiration in the next village over. Adad fills a clay vessel with grain and walks toward the river. He does not know exactly what the day will bring. But he knows that what he carries has value. And that value, quietly and invisibly, is the beginning of everything. This is how it worked. Not with money. Not with prices. Not with the cold mathematics of modern commerce. But with negotiation. With relationship. With the slow, careful dance of two people figuring out what fairness looked like between them, without any rulebook to consult. How much grain for a repaired net? How many fish for a new clay pot? What length of cloth is worth a full season's barley? These were not simple questions. They required trust. They required judgment. They required the kind of intuitive wisdom that comes from living closely alongside other people and understanding what things truly cost in time, skill, and effort. ****. When grain became gold. Over generations, the people of Mesopotamia developed something remarkable. Certain goods began to function not just for their own sake, but as common measures of value. Barley was perhaps the most important. A bundle of barley of a standard size became a kind of proto-currency, not money exactly, but something that functioned like it. Everyone understood its value. Everyone needed it. And so it became a common language that different trades could all speak. Silver, too, began to circulate, first in irregular lumps weighed on delicate balance scales, then in more standardized forms. The great temples of Mesopotamia, vast, stepped ziggurats that rose from the plains like mountains made by human hands, became early banks. They stored grain and goods and silver, lent them to farmers and merchants, and kept careful record of what was owed and what had been paid. The priests and administrators who managed these temple economies developed systems of accounting that were among the earliest in the world. Tiny wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay tablets by a reed stylus. Dried in the sun. Stored in careful order. Think about this: the same fundamental human need, to keep track of what has been given and what is owed, runs in an unbroken thread from a clay tablet on a Mesopotamian shelf to the spreadsheet on your desk, across 5,000 years of human ingenuity and adaptation. These were the world's first financial records. The ancestors, in a very real and traceable line, of every invoice and balance sheet that exists today. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The flaw that changed everything. But bartering had a problem. A quiet, structural flaw that would eventually force the next great leap forward in human commerce. What if Adad needed fish, but Enlil the fisherman didn't need grain that season? What if Tiamat the weaver needed new sandals, but the cobbler already had all the cloth he needed? The barter system only worked when both parties happened to want exactly what the other was offering. Economists would one day give this condition a wonderfully precise name, the double coincidence of wants. And the longer a community grew, the more complex its needs became, the less reliably that coincidence could be counted on. Imagine trying to buy a meal at a restaurant if you could only pay with whatever you happen to be carrying in your hands. A handful of seeds. A spare sandal. A small quantity of wool. It would be exhausting. Inefficient. Limiting in ways that would eventually stifle trade rather than encourage it. The people of Mesopotamia felt this friction long before they could name it. And in feeling it, in being frustrated by it, in working around it with increasing creativity, they began to imagine something better. The limitations of bartering were not a dead end. They were an invitation. They were the problem that pushed human beings toward one of their most transformative inventions, money itself. Bartering did not die, it simply evolved. And in evolving, it gave birth to everything that followed. Coins. Markets. Banks. Corporations. Stock exchanges. The entire vast, humming, interconnected global economy that moves trillions of dollars every single day traces its origin back to this. Two people beside a river, exchanging grain for cloth, 5,000 years ago. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. What the first deal really teaches us. It is tempting to look back at bartering as primitive. As a clumsy, inefficient precursor to the sophisticated systems we have today. But that would be to miss something profound about what those ancient exchanges actually were. They were acts of trust. Radical, voluntary, entirely unenforceable acts of trust between strangers. Adad had no way to guarantee that Enlil would repair the net well. Enlil had no way to guarantee the grain was as good as claimed. There were no courts, no contracts, no consumer protection laws. There was only reputation. Relationship. The knowledge that they would see each other again tomorrow, and the day after, and every market day for the rest of their lives. Business, at its most fundamental level, has never been about money. It has been about people deciding again and again, across 5,000 years of history, that the act of exchange is worth the risk. That what the other person has to offer is valuable enough to part with something of your own. That conviction, simple, ancient, and utterly human, is the seed from which every business in history has grown. From the grain fields of Mesopotamia to the digital markets of today, commerce has always been, at its heart, a story about human beings choosing connection over isolation.